Welcome to the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This podcast is dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like all the best bookshops, this podcast is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. So tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book at the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. I'm Stacey Horan, author, book lover, and host of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This is episode number 156. For more information about this or any of our episodes, go to my website, staceyhoran.com. If you enjoy the podcast, leave us a review, like us on social media, and share us with your friends, family, and fellow readers. In today's episode of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet, I'm chatting with author Cheryl Hollon about her Paint and Shine cozy mystery series. Along with a murder mystery, this series boasts the unique and whimsical combination of landscape painting, southern cooking, and moonshine. This series is close to Cheryl's heart, as it features the Appalachian farmhouse where her father grew up and where she herself spent her summers as a kid. Also, the main character, Miranda Trent, is named after both her great-grandparents. There are currently 2 books available in the Paint and Shine mystery series, Still Knife Painting and Draw in Order. The third, Death-a-Sketch, will be out in July. This is Cheryl's second cozy mystery series. Her first, Webb's Glass Shop Mysteries, features glass art and is set in the Arts District of St. Petersburg, Florida. In this episode, I'll chat with Cheryl about her writing journey, how being an artist has helped inform and color her writing, and how answering a call for submissions led her to discover that she has a cozy voice in her writing, as well as a few other things coming up. Cheryl Hollon, I want to thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast. I thought what we could do today is start by talking about your new series, the Paint and Shine Mysteries. You have 2 books out and a third coming, Death-a-Sketch, coming in July. Let's talk a little bit about this series. If you don't mind, introduce us to it and tell us what inspired you to start writing it.
Well, thank you very much for having me on your podcast. And I am excited about this new series. It's very, very close to my heart. Although I live in downtown St. Petersburg, Florida, and we're nearly native. We've been down here since 1975. This is set in eastern Kentucky. And the reason is my parents were born, raised, married, and now rest in peace in the Adams Family Cemetery, right by the family farm. So yes, it's really the Adams Family Cemetery. But that inspired me to write a series set there, because I spent most of my summers as a young girl visiting my grandparents and spending vast amounts of time running barefoot through corn, playing in creeks, and climbing on trees, and it was just idyllic. So I set a series there. And I named my main character Miranda Trent, after both of my great-grandparents. So that was something that my folks were really pleased about. So Miranda has a degree in art from the Savannah School of Art and Design. And she goes to New York City to make her name in the art community. However, as frequently turns out, she's making much more of a starving than a living. So when she gets word that her uncle has left her the family farmhouse in eastern Kentucky, right smack dab in the middle of the Daniel Boone National Forest, oh, she is so thrilled. So she goes down there and decides to start a business which is catching on to this cultural touring fad. So for her, She brings clients up to fabulous woodland trails, and they do a group painting in front of one of these amazing vistas. Then she takes everybody back down to the farmhouse for a completely authentic Southern meal, and it's paired with home brewed moonshine. So, of course, she calls the business Paint and Shine.
Very nice. Tell us a bit more about Miranda Trent, named after your great grandparents, but how did you craft her as a character? Did she just suddenly pop into your head? Did you hear her voice first? How did you create her? How did she come about?
Well, we're storytellers in my family. I mean, you can't get out of Eastern Kentucky without knowing how to tell a tale. It's just in our DNA. We're of Scotch-Irish descent, and as you know, we do a lot of talking. But the name Miranda is my father's grandmother's name, and I have heard about her since I was, old enough to hear it all, about her adventures in moving to Eastern Kentucky and how she was such a strong woman, even though she had no advantages in life at all. And then on the other side of the family, my grandmother was the first postmistress in Eastern Kentucky. She actually passed the postmistress test. It's a government GS7 or something like that. So I had two very strong women in my life to think about. And so that's how Miranda Trent was born. And I like to put art in all of my books. I think it feeds our souls and makes us figure out how we fit in the world and interpret things that are uncomfortable. And so art is always a big thing in my books. So I love landscape painting. And so that's what I gave her as her skill. And the farmhouse that's described in the books is where my dad grew up. So a lot of things came together, and I do so enjoy writing these books.
Are you an artist yourself? Do you paint?
I do. I'm a advanced amateur, is what I like to say. I prefer oil painting because it's such a lush and tactile, and you can correct things in oil because it doesn't dry quickly. So that's been my passion. I also draw and sketch, and I'm a member of the local art community. So I still take lessons, which is a very nice way to set aside time to concentrate on art. But yeah, and there are artists in my whole family.
So when you were deciding upon the elements of this cozy mystery series, I imagine art became a big one, something easy to write about, important for you to add to books. What were the other elements of the cozies that you wanted to incorporate into your books?
One of the really pleasurable things in a cozy is the close community, closed and close. These people all know each other. They may have known each other all their lives. So there's a comfort in having people around you that know your history far beyond you. They know your history, back to the beginning. And that makes for, easy relationships. Well, maybe not easy, but known relationships. I think that having a setting that people are curious about is also a good thing. And the Appalachian country is just hauntingly beautiful. So I knew I wanted to bring that in. So that's setting. And having a strong young woman lead her little crew into facing these problems, because even in a cozy, there will be a murder. I like seeing that. I I like supporting a strong woman leader.
Yeah. So you've mentioned that this series contains a number of real life elements, farmhouse, character names, location. As a general rule, how much of real life seeps into your stories? Do you draw inspiration from real events that take place, things from your past, conversations that you've had, people you know? How much do you find you draw on from real life, and versus how much you make sure you make up whole cloth?
It's a mix.
Yeah.
In the second book, I put in a discovered skeleton on a trail, not on the trail, but off to the side of the trail. And I read about that happening on the Appalachian Trail, where someone had gone missing for, I think, maybe 10 years. And they were discovered something like only 250 yards off the trail. But because it's the Appalachian Mountains, that is, absolutely a lifetime away. You will never be discovered. So I put that in because I thought that was a fascinating way to bring in something old in with the modern day, investigation. But I actually modeled the victim after one of my cousins, as you do. So that was kind of fun as well.
Do you always know how the stories will turn out before you start writing them? Do you have it all planned out either in your head or on paper before you begin?
Well, I'm mostly a plotter. I mean,
Okay.
I'm a retired aerospace engineer, so I need to know where I'm going. I'm used to having, something all laid out first. But Death of Sketch is my ninth published book. So I now know to leave room for all of these little whisperings of genius that come to you as you're writing the book. So my outlines are looser than they used to be because I want to leave room for these things that occur to me. But yeah, I'm definitely a plotter, but I have kind of shades of pantsing as well.
Do you have plans for more books in this series?
Yes, there are many, many trails and many adventures in the Eastern Appalachians that I'm thinking about. I'm working right now on the seventh book of my Glass Shop mystery series. So as soon as I get done with that, I'll start sort of noodling about what would be a good plot for another Kentucky book.
And let's talk a little bit about the Webb's Glass Shop series. You mentioned you're working on the seventh, you have six out in that. Tell us a little bit about that series.
That was where I first discovered that, what you know is really what you want to write about. It lends such authenticity to the actual stories. And I had been sort of playing around with wanting to be a writer, like the last 5 or 6 years before I retired. But I hadn't really hit on anything. My business, of course, was aviation. And what I had written there just didn't seem to really catch the eye of either, agents or editors. But I saw a kind of call for submissions on cozy mysteries. And that's when I kind of threw in what my husband and I had been doing as a hobby for over 25 years. We had been working in glass and had a kiln in a little workshop behind the house. So we had been making, really sophisticated glass for friends and for craft shows and for gifts for a long time. When I combined the two, writing about a young woman who owns a glass shop, it all came together very quick. And within 3 months, I not only had an agent, but I had a 3-book contract with Kensington. So the write what you know kind of is very important.
What made you decide to set the book in St. Pete? You were living there, but for these kinds of mysteries. You really could have set them anywhere. What was it about that location that you thought lent itself not only to sort of the art scene, but also the murder scene as well?
One of the lovely things about downtown St. Petersburg, it's incredibly walkable. The business owners all kind of know each other and support each other. So that's something that I wanted to bring in. And we have lots of glass shops. We're almost the glass coast of Florida, in that there's a Chihuly permanent museum here. There's an Imagine museum with 2 floors of glass objects. So glass is really big here. And of course, we had been doing it for a long time. But St. Petersburg is in a real kind of growing stage of becoming a destination all itself. There's a thriving foodie kind of wave coming through, and there are, new skyscrapers. I mean, right downtown right now, they're building a 48-story condo, which is really weird, but that's progress, and it's bringing in, a lot of culture, a lot of art. And what I like about St. Pete is they're not giving up culture for donuts. There's really a lot of art here. So I wanted to share that, and I wanted to share the behind the scenes work of a person trying to run a small business in the midst of all this kind of change in both the community and, teaching students and dealing with art shows. And I just wanted to help make that kind of life known.
Tell us about your main character, Savannah Webb. Introduce us to her.
So Savannah is a taller, smarter, thinner me, in that she has a lot of energy. She is, she's inherited the family glass shop from her father. And diving into running a business is, oh my goodness, it's so much learning of how to, run your shop, order supplies, continually bring in students. So many people think that owning your own business is basically kind of a blank check for, you own your own time, you can work whenever you want. Well, yeah, you can work whenever you want as long as you're working all the time. And money is always tight. And I just kind of wanted to bring out those sort of issues for anyone that was, thinking about starting their own business. It is not easy.
You mentioned you began this series when you saw that call for submissions. I'm curious, were cozies something you read? Were you a fan of cozies, or was this something you were trying for the first time?
Well, what I didn't actually know is that I have a natural cozy voice. I don't like violence on the page, and there will never be a pet or child harmed in any of my books. And essentially, I want my mother to be able to read them, without fainting. So it's kind of my natural voice. I didn't know that there was actually a genre called cozy mysteries, but I've always enjoyed Agatha Christie, P.D. James, the more direct on relationships and character rather than chase and shoot 'em up sort of stuff. So I've always naturally written them. I just didn't know what they were called.
You mentioned that you were an engineer and you started writing towards the end of your career as you were retiring. So you don't necessarily have maybe a traditional path to being an author. How did your prior career influence your current writing career? Because they sound very different, right? You were an engineer before, and now you write cozy mysteries.
You can't really get much different than that. However, what we used to say is now I used to build flight simulators for military projects all over the world. And a flight simulator is a great big device that's about 3 stories tall. It's huge. And what we used to say is, we can't deliver the flight simulator until the paperwork weighs as much as it does. So there is a lot of paperwork, and it's the kind where you're describing processes that are difficult, but you have to describe them clearly. So, I mean, I had writing chops, but it was a different kind of writing. And it was a pleasure to actually bring these stories out of my own head and put them on the paper. And no one was actually going to test that procedure. It was wonderful.
Were there things that you had to unlearn from that prior writing experience?
Oh, yes. Documentation is dull and accurate and exacting. Bringing in emotion, feelings, tension, those were all new to me, and I had to learn them from scratch. And so that was interesting. I love learning, but it's a deliberate phase that I had to go through of, get the story down. Okay, oh, now let's add some emotion. How does she react to that? And that was the new stuff. And it was really enjoyable.
Was there any particular skill, writing skill from your prior career that you find was actually helpful in writing fiction?
Having a set process and showing up at the keyboard at the same time every day and just writing. It doesn't sound like that's the hard part, but actually it is the hard part, because there's so many other things that are so nice to do rather than the hard part of putting those words on the paper. So I found that structure that I was used to, you show up, you do your job, and get on with it. And that and persistence is, I think, why I have 9 books out. And I'm working on 10, and I've got thoughts for 11. It's just a practical matter of routine and showing up.
How do you keep yourself engaged in the writing, particularly when you're writing a long running series and you're spending time with the same characters over and over again? How do you make sure that you stay engaged in the story, and then hopefully readers stay engaged as well?
Well, I try to give them problems that are real life problems, and that I don't always know how they're going to address them, but I sort of set a goal for each book. And I also kind of focus on a different character in each book for them to grow a little bit. In my Glass Shop series, I have an autistic student in the Glass Shop, and he's becoming a very valuable member of the team for both the business and for investigations. But in this next book, it's time for him to actually get a girlfriend. So I know this character very well. Jacob is a sweetie, but all of the things that he has to go through to gear himself up for the fact that he cares for someone else, it keeps me interested, and I think it will keep the reader interested.
Do you have a wish list of projects, things that you want to write about, or other things you want to do as an author?
Strange you should ask. I'm actually sort of noodling around with a historical aviation series because of my background, and I love aviation. And it's basically kind of like if one of the Hidden Figures women were an older Nancy Drew set in the middle of the United Kingdom and works for British Airways. So that's what I'm kind of working on behind the scenes.
Well, that ought to keep you busy.
Yes, it is. I'm 50 pages in so far. And the delightful thing about starting a new book is, oh, you're so in love with it. Everything's wonderful. We're still on our honeymoon. So I'm very happy with this book.
Good. I'm curious, when you began your writing career, where did you go to find people who supported your writing? How did you develop your community, your own writing community?
I call that my tribe. And
Mhm.
here in St. Petersburg, I'm lucky that there is a chapter of Sisters in Crime who supports, the ongoing development of women writers.
We should probably mention Sisters in Crime, an actual organization, not women out there bonding over criminal activity, right?
And another confusion is they think that we're a band of nuns that are helping convicts. So no, it's writers. It's writers. And so they have an online group called the Guppies, which stands for the Great Unpublished. So when I found that online group, I was able to ask all sorts of questions that were really useful for a starting writer. And I still belong to them, even as a published writer, and share whatever I can share with new writers as they come along. And it's important to have other people around you that are in all phases of, writing, beginners and people with 20 books. And we chat quite frequently about the business and quite frankly as well. So it's very useful. You need to find a tribe, and there are so many writing groups. There's bound to be one near.
Well, if people want to learn more about you and your books, the various series that you have going on, new releases when they're out, where should they go to find you and that information?
I have a website, and it's www.CHERYLHOLLON.com. I'm pretty good about keeping it up to date. It has all my books there, the newer ones and those that are already out. The other place is Facebook and Twitter, again, under Cheryl Hollon.
And if people are interested in purchasing a copy of any of the Paint and Shine mysteries or the Webb's Glass Shop mysteries, where should they go to buy them?
First, your local independent bookstore. My books are distributed widely, so they can order them for you. Then on Amazon and also in the large Barnes and Nobles. So I'm lucky to have such wide distribution.
And we should mention that Death a Sketch is the Paint and Shine book number 3, which should be out in July.
Yes.
Good. Well, Cheryl, I want to thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast. And I want to wish you luck with Death a Sketch and all of your works in progress. We'll look forward to those. Congratulations on everything you've accomplished so far, and best of luck with the rest of your writing journey.
Thank you so very much, Stacy. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
The Bookshop at the End of the Internet is a podcast dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like any good bookshop, this podcast features a wide variety of books by the equally varied and interesting authors who felt compelled to write them. This podcast gives you a chance to meet these wonderful writers and discover your next must-read book. Listen to the authors describe their books and tell you their stories in their own words. My interviews feature books from all genres and authors from all walks of life, including those who are indie published, as well as those published by small presses and large publishing houses. Looking for unique, not so easy to find books for yourself, a friend, or a book club? Tune into this podcast and find your newest favorite author, or maybe a soon-to-be bestseller. This podcast, like all the best bookshops, is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. Tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book. You never know what treasures you might find in the Bookshop at the End of the Internet.